Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric. You saw the title, let's jump right in. I think Hersheypark's roller coaster lineup is overrated. I hear so many now, not quite sure why, saying it's the best roller coaster collection in America. Many have talked about how the park is now the new Cedar Point, better, all that. And I could have talked about other aspects of the park in this video, but the only one I think is really overrated is the roller coasters, so I want to talk about that. For me personally, this collection, while certainly has a good number in 14, and there are plenty of good ones, I think compared to quite a few parks in America, it's not really spectacular. I would say the collections of, just for example, Cedar Point, Kings Island, Six Flags Great Adventure, Six Flags Great America, Six Flags Magic Mountain, even the 10 roller coaster lineup of Busch Gardens Tampa, I prefer overall. There's a lot of good stuff in here, and I'm going to individually talk about each roller coaster and say why I think it contributes to an overall underwhelming ride lineup compared to the hype. But first, let's make one thing clear. For those watching in the future, or even those commenting right now, but RMC Wildcat's going to be the best roller coaster in the world. First of all, I don't think so. Second, this is being made before RMC Wildcat, in this case Wildcat's Revenge, and I have been on Wildcat, so I do want to talk about that one, even though, for the time being, it's not really that major. But this is based on the main 2022 season, because I did get on Wildcat. Let's start from the best rides, that way it's a little more positive. Candymonium is my number one at the park. Right off the bat, that's not the best look compared to some other parks. So to put it in perspective, Candymonium is probably one spot away from being in my top 25 roller coasters in the world. Out of a good 300 or so credits, I would say that's impressive, no doubt. It's a good ranking. Unfortunately, compared to most other parks in America that I hold to really high esteem, it's not an excellent number one. Now, I can't act like, hey, this is definitely the worst number one of every major park, because it's right there with Raging Bull, and it's not far off from some really good rides like Goliath and Six Flags Over Georgia. But right off the bat, this being number one for me, you would hope that there's a good amount of really great roller coasters after Candymonium to help make for an excellent maybe top 5, such as with Kings Island or Cedar Point. And I'm sure number 2 is great, right? Well, yes. Following Candymonium, a great B&M Hyper but not one of the very best, there are 2 roller coasters I'm going to talk about together. The number 2 and number 3 in the park respectively are Storm Runner and Fahrenheit. Both rides are very fun. Strong Intamin creations with some nice elements. And here is the thing. While I like these rides a lot, they are something that hadn't really been an issue for me with many rides before, but because I've been on more roller coasters now, I think this will become more common. I think Storm Runner and Fahrenheit are forgettable. They are not very memorable ride experiences compared to a good amount of other things, even in Hersheypark. Like when I think back to Storm Runner and to a much greater extent Fahrenheit, I'm like, what happened on those rides again? And it's like, oh yeah, that's what happened. I know some might think this is sacrilege. Bear in mind, these are still excellent rides. They could definitely be in the top 75 roller coasters that I've been on, but I don't think they're particularly standout attractions. And when they're kind of just decent number 2 and number 3 behind a B&M Hyper, that's already not the strongest look. To put it in perspective, I was talking about Six Flags Over Georgia earlier. I mentioned that Goliath is better than Candymonium. The next 2 roller coasters there, I would say, are a better top 3 overall for sure than Hersheypark. Twisted Cyclone, while certainly not the strongest of RMCs, has memorable moments that stand out more than stuff on Storm Runner and especially Fahrenheit. Then you have Superman Ultimate Flight, massively underrated B&M flying coaster, and the pretzel loop alone is a stronger element than anything that is found on either Storm Runner or Fahrenheit. Now, I know this sounds like I'm really bashing these two, but no, I still think they are excellent rides. The flying snake dive is an element that does stand out on Storm Runner, and to a lesser extent, the launch. Fahrenheit, I remember very little about and would have to revisit a POV to remember why I put it at number 3 in the park in the first place. But I love Storm Runner, and it's a great number 2 at the park. But compared to other stuff, and the fact that some have called it, sorry Grant, their favorite roller coaster, it's totally fine, but I don't feel the same way. And bear in mind, with all of these, it's a matter of opinion and preference, and the only reason I'm making this list is the only reason that things ever happen in the roller coaster community in terms of opinions, and that is that no one has the same mind as another person. Therefore, we differ in our views. So of course, some might think Storm Runner is the most memorable short but sweet experience ever. For me, it's not a standout attraction. Now for number 4. Okay, here we go. Skyrush. Skyrush is the most overrated roller coaster in the park far and away. And it is the main reason something like this exists. Now obviously, people are probably saying right now, but everyone hates on Skyrush. Look at Airtime Thrills and Parks Pros and all that. And you know what? I probably enjoy Skyrush more than they do. Actually, that's definite. But I still hear so many people say it's top 10 in the world. Even people who have over 1,000 roller coasters under their belt. And that I cannot fathom. Because even if the restraints did not hurt, I feel that the ride is too short and lacks strong elements that would make it an elite roller coaster. There are moments of brilliance, but they are not the best elements in the world by any means. And the ride feels Storm Runner's length, basically, for me. And I'm surprised no one else ever talks about that. So yeah, Skyrush, I've mentioned before, overrated, and yeah. Number 5 is Great Bear at this park. And you know what? Pretty much everyone else says Great Bear is the 5th best in the park. So it must be basically the same esteem for me, so it's not overrated, right? Wrong. Great Bear is probably my least favorite invert, with the exception of select Batman the Ride clones. The issue for me is that this ride has a strong first half with fun elements, but at a certain point gets kind of meandering and slow, and it's an overall short ride. Now I know plenty of you will justify this because the ride was put into a small area. And yes, that is the case for this and Skyrush, and it's totally fair. I understand why this happened with the roller coaster. I understand that there are sometimes constraints that keep them from making a better ride, but you know what? That does not mean I have to like it as much as everyone else. So Great Bear, it's a fun ride, and most people in my family think it's the best invert pretty much. They think it's right up there with something like Montu. But for me, I think in terms of my ranking of roller coasters, there's probably a good 50, maybe 70 place gap between Montu and Great Bear. And I know in the song Sweet Style, Hersheypark said Great Bear is just as good as Montu. That's my least favorite part of that song. And that was even before I wrote Great Bear. Now it's pretty set in stone for me. Now let's talk 2 wooden coasters at the same time. Lightning Racer and Wildcat. These are both great wooden roller coasters. Now in general, I'm just not quite as sucked into a wooden coaster experience as a steel coaster experience. But compared to most other wooden coasters, I'm pretty sure these both have a shot at being in my top 10. And I'm sure that's crazy for some of you. You all hate Wildcat. And I actually find it kind of baffling that people can go on Skyrush and say, yeah, that's a painless, awesome experience. And then they can ride Wildcat and say, this is unbearable and I'm so glad it's gone. I kind of wish Wildcat stayed. I know Wildcat's Revenge will be a better experience. There's almost no doubt about that. But I loved Wildcat. It was a great wooden coaster, and for that to be number 7 at the park, that's where I can kind of see what people like about the depth of this lineup. And one thing I want to throw out there about Skyrush one final time, I remember hearing someone saying you have to ride it 5 times to really appreciate and enjoy it. But honestly, I don't think it's worth it to ride Skyrush 5 times if it's gonna eventually get good. Because 5 rides of Skyrush is kind of torturous. But back to the wooden coasters, I would ride Wildcat all day. And yes, people told me I happened to go on the day where it ran better than ever. And maybe that's true. But you know what? It is the one thing that almost kept me from making this video. So I wouldn't complain about the fact that I enjoy it, because it almost saved you guys from having to be tortured by me complaining about Hersheypark. Now I want to talk Jolly Rancher Remix, the number 8 roller coaster in the park. And I'll point out a lot of parks that have Vekoma boomerangs, the boomerang would rank much higher than 8th, comparatively with how many roller coasters they have, things like that. Just for example, Canada's Wonderland and Carowinds. Jolly Rancher Remix might be the best of boomerangs. The restraints are great, the ride is fun and forceful and smooth, and while the gimmick doesn't really add anything for me, I guess it's nice to have. So, honestly, from what you're hearing right now, my general consensus of Hersheypark's roller coasters is that they have a very strong collection of sort of supporting rides, in the way Six Flags Great America has phenomenal ones. Six Flags Great America might have the best supporting coaster lineup, because after the top 5 there, you have quite a bit to enjoy. Batman the Ride, American Eagle, Viper, and it goes on from there. Here you have a very strong Lightning Racer, Wildcat, and Jolly Rancher Remix. While I prefer the one at Great America, this is good. Now, the next best roller coaster and next best wooden coaster I should mention is Comet. Comet is an old buzz bar wooden coaster that has its moments of airtime, kinda rough, far from the best classic wooden coaster, but still nice to have. It's definitely the worst roller coaster named Comet that I've ridden. Great Escape is the superior one by far. I'm kinda surprised when people say this is better than Lightning Racer, but people call Lightning Racer forceless, and that's yet another reason why I almost didn't make this video. But I guess to a lesser extent, Comet is overrated. So that pretty much covers the major thrilling roller coasters in the park. I'll get to the family in a moment, but compared to, let's go with the big guns. Let's compare to Kings Island's lineup. So the best roller coaster, Candymonium, compared to the best roller coaster, Mystic Timbers, or the B&M Hyper, Diamondback. I'm sorry to say, Candymonium pales in comparison to both. They're all fantastic rides, but Kings Island's rides are leagues above. And the rest of the top 5 at Kings Island is just phenomenal. And I don't get why people don't say Kings Island is in the same boat as Hersheypark in terms of top 5. Some do, but I hear people say Kings Island lacks a standout roller coaster, but there are 3 roller coasters that are definitely better than the best at Hersheypark for me, and Banshee and the Beast are better than everything with the exception of Candymonium. So Kings Island, the main roller coasters, well above. So even disregarding Cedar Point, I don't see Hersheypark having the best roller coasters, not a chance. The other thing to mention is the supporting lineup. Kings Island has Flight of Fear, Racer, Invertigo, and if you don't count it as family too much, the Bat. At Hershey you have Lightning Racer, Wildcat, Jolly Rancher Remix, and Comet. I would say Hershey's in this category might be better. So that is the one thing that kind of keeps me from saying Hersheypark's roller coaster lineup is completely overblown. It still does not deserve the hype it gets overall, but it's not bad by any means. And it's a very cohesive, fun, thrilling collection. But now we have to talk about the family coasters. And I'm sorry to say, but the family lineup at Hersheypark is kind of an embarrassment. Let's start with the good one. Super Duper Looper is a great Schwarzkopf coaster. For what it is, it's fun. It meanders, only brings real strong forces in the loop, but for a family ride, I can see many enjoying it. I, for one, prefer most Schwarzkopf coasters. I think people in general would probably have more fun with Mindbender, Shockwave, and Scorpion even at Busch Gardens Tampa. This is around the same level as New Revolution at Magic Mountain. And to put in perspective, this being number 10 out of 14 at Magic Mountain, I'd say New Revolution is probably, out of the 20 roller coasters, number 13. So they're very similar levels, and that's a plus for Hersheypark. But now the rest of the family coasters, it's not a good collection. Laff Trakk is the next best, and Laff Trakk is kind of baffling in the decisions made on the ride. First of all, I must say it should not be a spinning coaster. It spins so little, but just enough that you can't enjoy any forces on the ride. It's not disorienting, and while the theming is so much fun, it's hard to appreciate when you're spinning around. And some might disagree with this, but I think it was an absolute misfire in terms of fun. And it's not a ride I would ever want to go on again, partially due to the line, but also because at Hersheypark, I think even if you removed the top 9 roller coasters, I would just go on Super Duper Looper over again and not Laff Trakk. Then there's Trailblazer. I went on the day after they finished some renovations, and I'm assuming the renovations were not making it smoother, because Trailblazer is the worst Aero Mine Train. With the exception of one that I barely count because of how bad it is, Canyon Blaster at Great Escape. This one is second worst. It's not smooth, and many are not in terms of Aero Mine Trains, so give it a little leeway. It's significantly rougher than most, but give it some leeway. It is short. There is little thrill to be found. The terrain is uninteresting, and the best part of the ride is looking at other roller coasters. And that can be fine. I mean, who doesn't like looking at Maverick and other stuff on Cedar Creek Mine Ride? Well, unfortunately, when the best part is the view of Storm Runner's final brake run, what kind of enjoyment are you getting out of this? Trailblazer is just not a good ride. Then you have Wild Mouse. It's among the weakest Wild Mouse coasters, and most of those aren't really that great anyway, so not helping. And Coco Cruiser, I'm mildly ashamed to say I've been on it, but I did want to be able to rank every single ride of the park. This is the worst because it is actually painful, and shockingly so. It's among the worst kiddie coasters, and I can't imagine a kid enjoying it. Unless they are just, like, numb to pain. So yes, I have ranted for quite a while now. It's probably been about 17 minutes. But the thing is, I just wanted to really go in on Hersheypark. Because even though I thoroughly enjoyed my time there, I thought it was great, and there's so much to love, it's not for the roller coasters entirely. Many have complained about Cedar Point this year, how it's falling behind, and how Hersheypark is taking the crown. And here's the thing. I feel that Hersheypark in general had every flaw of Cedar Point this year. Huge crowds, poor operations on abundant rides, everything besides the ride closures, which were not really a factor at Hersheypark for me, that can be found at both parks. But unfortunately for Hershey, it does not have Cedar Point's roller coaster lineup to make up for these shortcomings. Cedar Point, it's time for the real comparisons. With a top 5, based on 2022, of Steel Vengeance, Millennium Force, Maverick, Gatekeeper, and Valraven. Keep in mind, this is without Top Thrill Dragster, of course, but that puts Hersheypark to shame, because all of those are better than every roller coaster at Hersheypark except for Candymonium, which is better than Gatekeeper and Valraven. This might not be a popular take, but that's why I'm making the video. So, what is the point of this video? Why am I saying all this? Part of it is just to see how riled up I can get some people, because I must admit, I very much enjoy having discussions in the comments about my less respected opinions. Now I know some of you who are Hersheypark fanboys, no disrespect if you are, but some of you can be extremely toxic, will go in and talk about how I am objectively wrong, and how I must be on drugs if I'm saying this. Well, unfortunately, I am not on drugs. This is completely serious. Hersheypark has 14 roller coasters. 5 of them make up a decent top 5, but one that would not be in the probably, in terms of Six Flags top 5s, probably would not be in the 5 best. Right off the top of my head, I would say Great Adventure, Great America, Magic Mountain, Over Georgia, Over Texas, and if rides were open, Fiesta Texas are better top 5s. Then you have a very strong supporting lineup to really help the park. And then you have really weak family coasters. So overall, Hersheypark, great place. Tons of excellent roller coasters, and once Wildcats Revenge opens, this will, to an extent, not be the same, because Hersheypark will be a better lineup. However, once people inevitably overhype RMC Wildcat and say it's better than Iron Gwazi and all that, I know I'll go right back to where I started and say it's an even more overrated lineup than it used to be. But overall, the real point I'm making here is all of those who are hyping up Hersheypark as the new Cedar Point, just know not everyone has your back. And in the same way, a lot of people are kind of ditching Cedar Point, I think in a few years' time, the same is going to happen to Hersheypark. Thank you for watching one of my most cynical videos of all time. This was a blast to make. I have not done a rant before. I'm really curious if you want to see more like this because I have so many more I can make. And subscribe for more content. Check out some of my more positive videos. I'll see you next time.